Hello! If you haven't seen any of my videos before, my name is Hannah and I run a small art business called BearBeretStudio. So in today's video, I thought I would go through how I set up my table display for art markets. This is something I've been wanting to talk about for a while because when I was starting out and doing art markets for the first time, I had no idea where to start. I was looking on Pinterest, like trying to find inspiration for how to set up my table, how to make my products look cute, and I just found that a lot of the displays that I was seeing were all very professional. They looked like they were very well put together, and all of the equipment that they used was a little bit out of my budget, so I thought that I would put together this video to kind of show you how you can set up a cute table display without having to invest too much money, especially if you're just starting out. So to start out, I'm just going to go through all of the essential things that you basically need to get started, and these are the things that you pretty much can't go to an art market without. First of all, you're going to need a table of some description. There are quite a lot of markets out there that do supply a table, and I actually think it is fairly common practice for them to provide the table for you, but I know that some outdoor events require that you bring your own table. So in this case, I would definitely recommend purchasing or sourcing a table that is foldable and transportable, like a trestle table. As well as this, you're also going to need a tablecloth of some kind. Sometimes the art markets will provide a tablecloth for you, but I think it's definitely worth finding one that actually matches the color palette and the style of your art so that it complements the things that you'll be selling on your table. You don't need to go out and buy like a professional tablecloth and a really fancy like fabric one. Honestly, my first tablecloth was actually a disposable party tablecloth, and it actually worked really well for the first few markets, and I still keep it on me just as like a backup in case my current tablecloth gets like spills on it. And it just goes to show that you really don't need to invest a lot of money up front. I think the tablecloth that I was using at the beginning was only like $4 or something, which is pretty good for beginners. The next thing you're going to need, which is also pretty essential, is a way of accepting payments. So a lot of markets, people will often bring cash with them, but you need to make sure that you have a way of accepting card payments because people don't always have cash. For me, I use a Square reader, which is a pretty affordable and very portable little reader that people can tap their card or their phone on, and I find that this is definitely the simplest way to accept card payments, but of course there are other options out there and you can do your research and see which one is going to work best for you. But I would say for beginners, I would absolutely recommend Square just because it's so simple and easy to use. In terms of accepting cash payments, it's also important that you bring a float with you. So essentially this is just a amount of cash that you bring so that you can give people change if they don't have the exact amount. So I normally make sure that I bring a couple of notes and coins just so that if people have the wrong amount, I can give them change. Something else that I would absolutely recommend investing in is something that has your logo on it, and preferably something large enough that people will be able to see it from far away. This doesn't mean that you have to go all out and buy like professional signage or anything, because for my very first market, I actually ended up just getting my logo printed on a long piece of paper, which I then draped over my table and used it kind of like a table runner. And this was really cheap. I just got it printed at my local office supply shop, and I actually still use it to this day because it still works for me and it gets my logo out there, so that's the main thing. You can also definitely DIY something if you wanted to make like a cute little banner with your name on it or print something out at home. Like, you can absolutely do that just as long as people will be able to see it. Something else that's also really important is to have something that has your business details on it that you can give to people. So I think printing out business cards is something that I would absolutely recommend, because I find that a lot of people who come to my table and don't necessarily buy anything will actually often take a business card, and that can actually potentially convert to a sale later on. So it's really important to have something like that that people can take with them, so if they don't want to buy something on the day, they can potentially buy something later from your shop when they get home, or they might even just follow you on Instagram, which is still also really beneficial. So once you have all of the bare essentials, the next thing that you're going to want to do is plan all of the products that you intend to sell. It's important to kind of make a list of this beforehand, because this will help you decide what kind of things you'll need to purchase or source for your display, and it will also help you plan out if you have enough products to fill a whole table, or if maybe you need to consider culling if you have too many products. So once you have a plan of all the products that you want to sell, now you can start considering what display things you'll need to be able to showcase all of your products. Before you go out and buy anything, I would absolutely recommend looking around your house and seeing if you have any existing household products or things that you can use to actually display your items without having to invest a bunch of money in buying new things. For example, dish racks are actually a really great way of displaying prints, and you can actually buy these really cheaply from IKEA if you don't have one already. But if this is something you already own, then this is a totally great way to be a little bit more thrifty. Something else that you can use is also makeup organizers. These are really great for small products like stickers, for example, and it can help you separate all of your products so that people can browse them more easily, which is really useful. To give you a little bit of an idea of how you can make your first setup, I thought I would go through what my very first art market setup looked like, just to give you kind of like an impression of how you can set something up on a budget and you don't have to go all out for your first market. In fact, I would definitely recommend starting smaller and then investing in more expensive display pieces as you develop and go to more art markets. For my initial very first art market, I started out with a disposable tablecloth, which I mentioned before, and my sign was just printed on a long piece of paper that I used as a table runner. A lot of things that I didn't already have, I actually purchased from Daiso. Daiso is a really great place to get cheap things for a display because they have so many little organizers and wire grids and things that can help you like pin things up and like showcase your products without having to buy like a professional, print stand or something. Another really useful product that I did purchase as well were these little folding collapsible crates, which I got from Kmart, but you can also get these from Amazon and a lot of other online retailers. Another thing to note as well is my very first setup was also not very cohesive in terms of branding, which is okay. It was my very first one, but I did have some kind of color scheme that at least made it feel like a little bit coordinated, but it wasn't necessarily like my specific brand yet. So you can see I have my like pastel green tablecloth, and then I had all of these colorful little crates and things, and even though they were all like different colors and a little bit mismatched, like I at least overall had sort of like a cute pastel theme that tied everything together. Another thing that was really important for my display was printing out price signs, and this is something that you should absolutely do so that you don't have to worry about customers coming up to you and asking about the price of things all the time, because there are also customers that might be a little bit shy and maybe don't want to ask about the price for things. So it's really important to have very clear and very obvious signage that is attached to each one of your products on your display. So for me, I actually just printed these little circular price signs at home, and I still use the same price signs because I find that they're really clear and they still work for me. So you can definitely do this yourself at home. Something else that I'd recommend for your very first setup is to actually keep your table at a relatively low profile. So you might find that when you go to art markets that you see a bunch of artists with these really tall displays with a bunch of fancy prints and so many products, and you might be like, oh wow, like I have this very small, very low-key setup, and I just want you to not let that discourage you, because you'll probably find that having a smaller display to start with is actually a lot more manageable for you, and you probably also don't want to be transporting like a huge display to your very first market, because that can be very overwhelming and very stressful. So don't let that discourage you. Having a very small setup to start with, I think it's actually a great thing because it just makes the whole process so much easier. Another little hot tip for your art market display is to actually have all of your products out on the table, and by that I mean don't have too much of your stock kind of sitting behind your table, because I think people actually more likely purchase a product if they actually get to like engage with it, maybe hold it in their hands. Obviously, if you have really fragile pieces that you don't want people touching, like you can add little signs and things, but I think it's actually quite nice, like if you're selling things like keychains or prints and things, like even if you just want to put them in a plastic sleeve to protect them, but still giving customers the opportunity to actually like flick through and have a look at your products, maybe hold them and actually make a decision whether they want to buy them by getting to look at them a bit more closely, I think is really important. So I would definitely recommend having as much of your stock on the table as possible, or as much as you feel comfortable with. And then the last thing that you might want to consider for your setup is having any extra little decorations just to add a little bit of flair or show a little bit more of your brand and personality. I would definitely recommend not overcrowding your display with too many trinkets and decorative things that aren't actually for sale, because this might kind of confuse your customers and they might try to buy something that isn't actually for sale. So I would definitely limit this to smaller things, or maybe things that are more like clearly decorative, like flowers or little lights or things like that, just to add a little bit of like, you know, creativity and cuteness, but you don't want to obviously just overcrowd your table and make it a bit of a mess. So now that I've gone through like my very first initial art market setup, I thought that I would kind of talk you through my latest art market setup, just so you can kind of see how you can add pieces over time and improve your display and don't have to stress about being all professional and having this massive display for your very first market. Like even now my display is still like relatively low-key compared to some other artists, but that's just for me personally because I don't like transporting huge amounts of things. I actually always try to keep my art market display limited to one suitcase, so that if I do have to do a market without any assistance or helpers, then I can carry it all by myself. Which brings me on to another point which I did forget to mention. If you're wondering how I like transport all my stuff to art markets, I would absolutely recommend getting a lightweight suitcase if you don't have one already, because this will honestly be such a lifesaver, especially if you're like me and you're usually getting public transport to your events. Definitely get something that is very light and portable, but will also protect all of your products and display items. So with that being said, my current display does have some elements that are similar from my very first display. Like for example, I still use these wire grids, but I now have these wire grids that you can actually convert into like cubes. I think they're actually like storage grids, and you can buy these on Amazon. Unfortunately, they are a little bit more expensive and you usually have to buy them in bulk. So maybe if you have an artist friend that also needs some of these wire grids, like maybe you could go halves. I also have invested in a couple more like storage things. So I now have these like little wire baskets that actually hook on to my wire displays, and this can help me with displaying extra products and also like storing things that I keep behind my table, like bags and things for people's products to go in. I also have this acrylic riser stand, which I did invest in from the very beginning and I still use it to this day, but I've actually created this little bear sign that attaches to the back of it, and it actually turned out really cute. It's a little bit rough around the edges, but for a DIY sign, I think it looks kind of cute. And it also kind of grabs people in as well because it's right in the center of my table, so it's kind of the first thing that you see, and it also adds a little bit more of like my branding and more of like a personal touch to my display. On top of that, I also just have some other small decorative things, like I have these fake tulips that I use, and I also have this cork board where I display all of my stickers. So it's just about having these like little details that make your table feel cohesive and also really highlights your products. Obviously, that's the main thing. One of the best parts of my current display, I think, is the fact that customers can interact with and pick up pretty much any product except for my art prints, and I feel like this really does help with converting sales because people can actually like hold a product in their hands and have a look at it in more detail and decide if they actually want to buy it. Also, another really important thing to consider is having different levels and different hierarchies in what you want people to focus on first. So I have my prints up quite high, and I decided to have them kind of at what people's eye level would be when they're standing and looking at my table. And then my smaller products, I kind of have them a little bit lower down on my table, but I still make sure that everything is kind of tiered so that none of my products are actually hidden or obscured behind any other products. Something else that I also use are these acrylic organizers, and these are probably one of the best investments that I have made because they work so well for so many of my different products. products, and Daiso actually sells them in quite a few different sizes, so you'll probably find that they're able to accommodate pretty much any product that you want to sell. So I use these for my acrylic keychains, my washi tape, and my stickers, and I also have this large sort of acrylic riser stand that I use for all my sticker sheets and also some of my blind bags and other sort of miscellaneous products. Something else that I also invested in from the start that I still love using is this little mini pin board thing that I got from Daiso, and I actually just blue tack my stickers and use it as kind of like a way to display all the different designs that I have on offer. And then underneath that I have all my stickers laid out in these little mini acrylic organizers that I mentioned before. Something else that I also really love using are those collapsible crates that I mentioned earlier in the video, and I managed to find some in colors that actually work really well with my branding. So originally I was just using them for extra storage, but now I've actually found that they look quite cute on my display, so depending on what I'm selling at the market, I sometimes will use those to display some of my products. So that is essentially how I set up my table at art markets, and I hope that this was helpful if you're a beginner, or maybe you've done 1 or 2 art markets and you're just looking for maybe some inspiration on how to set up your table. I know that when I was starting out it was a bit hard to kind of imagine what my table would look like at an event like this, but I think if you start small and just invest in little display items over time, you'll find that it's pretty manageable and you can make your dream display happen. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more videos from me, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!